Welcome back. The White House just announced President Biden will sign the Inflation Reduction Act tomorrow. And that comes as Democrats are hitting the road, trying to keep up their midterm momentum on their positive accomplishments, despite the headlines swirling around former President Trump. Now, just this week, the White House has nearly 30 events scheduled, with cabinet and sub-cabinet officials traveling to 19 states and territories. The events kick off with three-day stops today, including Education Secretary Miguel Cardona holding an event on HBCUs in South Carolina. They've got 6 events planned tomorrow. On Wednesday, another 10 events, putting the focus on the Inflation Reduction Act, and 9 more events Thursday and Friday. All told, the White House says they'll make 35 trips to 23 states and territories this month, and the president and vice president will join in on the push once they return from their summer vacation. So a lot to discuss here. Finally, Friday, we'll have Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack speaking in his native Iowa in the state fair. Joining me now on set is Washington Post congressional reporter Marianna Sotomayor, former Maryland Democratic Congresswoman Donna Edwards, and former RNC Chairman Michael Steele. He's also an NBC News political analyst. Thanks to all of you for helping me kick off a very busy week. Donna, let me start with you and this push by the president and the White House and his cabinet secretaries to get the message out about what Democrats have accomplished. They had a good week last week, and yet it came at the same time that there was all of this focus on his predecessor and the search of Mar-a-Lago. How do you think the president can effectively break through all of the noise here?
Well, I think Democrats, and particularly the president, are going to have a really good August, which is something that Democrats are not necessarily accustomed to. And in those states, in those districts, I think when the president is there and members of Congress are there, that's what the focus is going to be. And it's what local people will see, which I think is really important. The Trump stuff, although it's a big national story, in states and communities, they want to know what's going to be delivered for them. And I think Democrats have a good news story to tell there.
And, Michael, that's a good point that Donna makes, which is all politics are local, basically. But what is notable about this moment is that it has shifted, any way you look at it, from being a referendum on Joe Biden to now being a choice between basically Democrats and Republicans, in this stark reminder that former President Trump is still the leader of the Republican Party. So how does that impact these races, where basically voters are making a choice between the Biden agenda, obviously inflation looming large over all of that, and what they're seeing with the former president?
Well, I agree with you. It is a choice election, which is not what Republicans want. They want this to be about a referendum, meaning, hey, the current administration just really stinks, and you hate that, and, you know, let them know by voting them out. And so the reality for Republicans now is everything else has now muddied the waters. Not just Trump. I mean, Trump is a major factor, but the Supreme Court, the January 6th hearings, certainly the economy. And on the economy, which is very interesting, I think the country is pretty much said, and we saw at the beginning of summer, where they went, inflation, I hate it, and gas prices are high. But then all these other narratives started trickling in and feeding their thinking, and they began to bifurcate. So you saw polling that showed the president at 38% approval, yet the generic ballot was starting to favor Democrats. And that's not how that's supposed to play. So what voters are doing now, to this point of looking at these candidates' campaigns, which are awful on the Republican side, they're not just being weighted down by the economy or economic issues. They're also looking at the totality. And that's going to make for a very interesting fall.
Marianna, the polling, which I think so many of us have done a double and triple take, because as Michael points out, historically, the party in power braces for big losses. In this case, they were bracing for a potential tidal wave of losses, particularly given inflation at a 40-year high. It's now coming down a bit. What are folks you're talking to on Capitol Hill saying about what they make of these polls and this moment? Do they think that this red wave may be subsiding a bit?
Yeah, I've been talking to a number of House Democrats and aides when they were on the Hill last week, because you were feeling that momentum. They were more positive, definitely cautious optimism, but they finally feel like, look, we've been saying we're going to deliver on prescription drugs, we're going to deliver on reforms to climate change, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. Now they can say, well, hey, look, we actually did this. And also, with the Inflation Reduction Act, Democrats themselves did this. Every single Republican voted against it. And that's what they want to be talking about. They don't want to be talking about Donald Trump, which, of course, begs the question, well, look what has happened last week. It has dominated headlines. Are you going to talk about Trump in any way, shape, or form? And they're not going to, is what I've been hearing from a lot of strategists. However, they want to make stark policy differences and say things like, look, we're doing this. What is Kevin McCarthy actually proposing? He's just going to go after Merrick Garland, the attorney general. They're going to try and impeach this guy or, investigate this guy. So those are the contrasts that they're going to continue to say on the campaign trail to just tell voters, look, we did this. Yeah. What are the Republicans going to give?
Is that smart strategy, Donna? Should they be talking about Trump more?
No, and they don't have to. I think one of the great things that Democrats have on their side is that what they see is that they're talking about the future. The Inflation Reduction Act is all about the future around climate change, prescription drugs, all the things that you outlined. And Republicans are all talking about the past. Well, voters want to hear about the future, especially as it impacts them. The other thing that I hear from House Democrats is that they're looking at the nominees in some of these swing districts, and they're seeing nominees who are on the far extreme right, and they're looking at that as a gold mine to mine Republican voters who are still in the middle and to mine independents. They see that as a path toward victory.
Let's talk about the races tomorrow. Liz Cheney's race, I think, is going to be the big one that everyone's watching. Michael, you talk about the poll numbers.
Yeah.
She's really down.
And Liz could care less.
Well, so talk a little bit about that. I mean, what are you going to be watching for tomorrow? So let's say that she doesn't pull off this miracle win.
I'm not watching anything.
What is it?
There's no drama here.
What does the divide mean, though, and what do you expect to see from Liz Cheney?
What I expect to see.
Do you think that this is laying the groundwork for 2024?
Oh, absolutely. Not just 2024, but even beyond. Look, Liz Cheney, after tomorrow, will be, I think, one of the more powerful voices in this town outside of the White House, to be honest. On Capitol Hill, the remainder of her term there, again, conventional wisdom, assuming she loses tomorrow night. But she has been setting this up for quite some time and laying down the tracks. The declarative statements she's made about the Republican Party to its face. I don't know why these men think that somehow when they beat poor little Liz, she's just going to go away. That's not going to happen. That's not in her political DNA. They know who her daddy is, right? All right. So the reality for someone like Liz Cheney, she has an opportunity to be even more clarifying after tomorrow night, and that for the Republican Party is going to be painful because she's going to have a lot of reinforcements from not just voices like myself, but from everyday Americans who've watched her and leaned into her leadership on behalf of democracy.
Marianna, weigh in here because you've obviously been watching quite closely as she's led these hearings. Yeah. And she's defiant and frankly undeterred.
Yeah, I will tell you what I will be looking at and hearing is what is her concession speech? We know she's going to lose, but what is she actually going to say? And to your point, is she actually going to mention what she will do the day after Tuesday? Does that mean she launches a think tank, which some people are saying maybe she will, to just counter Trump, or a political action committee to, again, counter Trump? She very much sees her position now in the party as taking away support votes, whether that means, running for president in 2024, we don't know that. But those are the questions that I'm going to be looking for. Maybe she will be answering them tomorrow in that speech.
Donna, final thought to you.
Look, I think Liz Cheney is the leader of the opposition party. And if the Republican Party is going to be rebuilt, it's going to be rebuilt by Liz Cheney. And I think that begins on Wednesday.
We will be watching all of it. Thanks to all of you. Such a great conversation, Marianna, Donna, and Michael. Really appreciate your being here.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.